Oh man, Trap, man, you gotta stop screaming when you die, dude. It's giving me a headache.
Well, I'm gonna
Your
wonder
mom's
when
gotta
you're gonna
stop
pull the dick
screaming
out
when
of
I
your
put it in her
fucking
butt.
mouth and learn how to talk.
Feature still visible on her couch. Police officers, what is the absolute worst crime scene you've come across? I know a guy who is a jail guard, and he also worked in TBS, Dutch equivalent of jail for people with severe mental health problems. There was this schizophrenic guy who was convinced he was a dog. Now that might just sound sad and pathetic, but the guy actually bit someone in the throat and shredded his jugular. He tried to do it in jail as well, and he now has to wear a muzzle 24/7. Danish cop here. Some years ago a coked-up driver hit a woman in central Copenhagen. She was hit with about 120 kilometers per hour while crossing the street with her boyfriend in hand. Her body flew about 100 meters down the street. When the first patrol car arrived at the place of impact, the boyfriend was sitting beside the body and caressing her head. It had to be 3 officers to pull him away from the woman. The driver was a well-known man that had done something close to this before. 2 underage Danish girls was in the back seat of the car he hit her with. I ended up in a fight with one of them cause she wouldn't stop phoning different people while we still were chasing the driver in the area around the car. Oh, and he could have killed about 10 people. About 20 seconds before he hit her, he drove through a red light at the busiest pedestrian crossing in Denmark. It was about 1 o'clock on a Saturday night and it was the night the Christmas Spear was released. He got a sentence of 4 years and 6 months. The longest sentence in Danish history for a hit and run. Prisoners in Denmark only serve 3/4 of the sentence. And in the weekend he got to go home from prison in the last year of the sentence. It's only a couple of months since the newspapers wrote that he hadn't returned to prison after a weekend at home. That's the lenient Danish prison system for you. My dad is currently sitting right by me. He has 20 years active patrol duty and then 7 as sheriff. Well, one time we got a call from a guy saying his girlfriend broke his dick. Obviously, we were skeptical. So we go along with ambulance and fire to their house and walk into his girlfriend sobbing and shaking in the corner. We walk into the bedroom and let me tell you, dicks might not be able to break, but this was a very broken dick. Turns out they had gotten drunk and she wanted to hop on his dick by jumping from the top of their headboard onto him. Yeah. Didn't work. She bent his dick in half. By the time we got there it had turned black and the bottom part was swelled but the top part was just flopping. I felt bad for that guy. The other one was a call we got from this woman saying Mrs. XYZ is 90 years old and we haven't seen her in 7 weeks. Can you perform a wellness check? This was in the middle of August after a couple streaks of 100-degree weather. 7 weeks is a long time. So me and Rich, his partner, go over and lo and behold no visible AC unit in this 100-year-old house. So we load up our noses with Vicks and open the door. Yeah. The Vicks didn't help. That house was well over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. This lady had basically melted into a sludgy mess with some human features still visible on her couch. The vapor her body was giving off was on the windows like condensation. Rich and I both threw up and called the coroner who basically had to remove this lady with her couch cushions. It was bad. Not a cop but paramedic. The worst thing I've seen was a 3-year-old burned from the waist down in a bathtub. The way this happened was the mother was super pissed at the baby's father and filled the tub with very hot water and dumped the child into the water. She then tried to hide what she did by putting pajamas on the baby, which caused the fabric to stick to the burns. I almost lost my job that night because I couldn't handle the smugness that was across that bitch's face. A guy high on PCP went over to his adult sister's house right before they left for a family birthday party. As the family is packing the car up, the guy remains behind in his 7-year-old niece's bedroom still high on dust. His niece forgets something in her room and runs back upstairs into the apartment. As soon as she reaches the apartment she hears a gunshot. She walks into her room and sees her uncle proned out on the floor bleeding profusely from the back of his head. Brains all over her bedroom wall. Family calls 911. I show up, walk in and assume the guy is dead by lack of movement and loss of blood. Find the gun, make it safe, and out of nowhere hear a huge deep breath and see the guy's chest moving. With half of his brain blown apart, the guy was still alive for at least 10 minutes but unresponsive. Medics transported to hospital where he died but donated his organs. In the end, it's the little girl who will live with that picture of her uncle for the rest of her life. It would be nice if you could take every kid out of every bad situation so they have a fighting chance to live a normal life. Suicidal female walks to the top of a 9-story hospital parking garage. Does a backwards swan dive off the top trying to kill herself. Ends up landing on both of her feet, which take all the impact. Every bone from her feet up to her first rib is shattered, but somehow she was still alive as I got there first. Looked like a slinky as IMS picked her up from the ground to transport, which in the end was futile. But for the few minutes I was on scene with her, I was able to speak to the woman who was still conscious. The most peaceful and eerily quiet conversation I had with a person who knew they were dead. She talked about her life, her family, and how she felt abandoned. She felt hopeless with no faith in life. Just like a vicious dog backed into a corner. She wanted me to tell her family that she was sorry, but didn't regret her decision. Very stoic if you ask me. And someone who was intent on killing themselves. No, just a cry for help scenario. An older co-worker told me this one. A man lived in an apartment with his 3 kids and wife. He goes to work and comes home at night, when one of his kids comes up to him and says, "I saw mommy kissing the neighbor's pee-pee." He slit each of his children's throats while they slept and cut his wife's head off. Left it on the kitchen table and smoked a cigarette calmly after calling 911 on himself. Said seeing the kids in their beds covered with open throats covered in blood messed him up for a long time. It wasn't all I ever saw, but certainly the worst. My career was effectively ended by a lady that got hit by a car. It basically ripped her whole face off, except her eyes, basically from the nose down. You could see her vocal cords. She was convulsing on the ground, and a crowd of people were standing around her. I was first there, and she was still alive. There was absolutely nothing I could do for her at that point. It was obvious she was bleeding out. I got down on the pavement, cradled her in my arms and told her she would be okay, while I tried to stop some of the bleeding. I knew I was lying, but I wanted her to not feel alone and scared when she died. She passed in my arms, as the medics showed up. They worked on her for a bit, but they called it before the chopper landed. 2 weeks later I quit. I've had severe PTSD since then. I drink a lot to self-medicate. I go to therapy. I've lost almost all of my friends, and several jobs. I take pills every day for depression. Sorry for the vivid description, but you asked. I can still smell it, see it, the works. Not a cop, but I did body removals for the private ambulance company I worked at. We got a call at 4 a.m. and our dispatcher asked us if we had 2 body bags. We did. We got there and the gist of it was that it was a double rape homicide of 2 elderly women in their 70s. One was found with her pants around her ankles in one room, and the other was found in the bedroom down the hall with her hands pinned above her head underneath the bed frame. I have no idea if they ever caught the guy. I just pick up the bodies and take them to the morgue. Pretty messed up though. Little girl tells her school nurse it hurts to pee. This leads to her making statements indicating molestation, so they send her to hospital and call me. Sane nurse confirms there is trauma to her vagina. Because she is a child I cannot ask her questions. We set up a forensic interview with people trained to deal with this so it is less stressful, but I can listen in while she is talking to doctors. I hear her say, "When I'm bad mommy and uncle bad touch, name changed for privacy, stick fingers inside me." So now I go find mom, expecting to hear complete denial. Nope. She tells me as a form of punishment she inserts fingers into her 5-year-old's vagina. Her brother, who lives with her, does it also. I wish I was making this up. Before you ask, the case was sent to the county prosecutor. I haven't heard anything from it since, which means she plead out, it was dropped, or it's still awaiting trial. An officer who volunteers at my work from time to time told me that his worst experience was during his first year on the job. Apparently there was a car accident where the driver was wedged halfway out of the overturned car. Unfortunately, since the car was on fire, they couldn't help the man out and had to stand there and watch him burn to death while he screamed for them to help him. And another one, a call goes out for reported screaming. It's mid-January. Important later, my father and another office respond to find a known deranged individual, very long rap sheet, and has been in and out of psychiatric care for years, sitting on the front porch holding a double-sided wood-splitting axe. Steam is coming up off the grass and there are chunks lying all over the lawn. Upon interviewing the suspect, he admits that he and a friend were playing poker. The suspect was losing nearly every hand and came to the conclusion that his friend was a haint, Southern for ghost, and was cheating him. The suspect grabbed the axe and chased his friend outside and hacked him into dozens of pieces, thus causing the warm blood to create steam on the grass. My dad tells the suspect that he needs to get in the police car because it's haint-proof. He said the suspect dropped the axe and sprinted to get in the back seat while thanking them for helping him. Not a policeman, but I know a former forensic scientist. She described a case one time where a father of two didn't receive custody of his kids after a divorce. He flipped out and kidnapped his kids. A homeless man handed in 2 plastic bags into a police station a few days later of body parts that had been cut up. She had to reassemble the kids' bodies so they could be identified. I've seen some pretty gruesome murders and accidents. Saw a woman stabbed over 50 times. A guy whose head was completely caved in by his steering wheel. Plenty of suicides via shotgun to the mouth. The one that stands out to me the most wasn't fatal, and it wasn't even that gruesome. Some guy got high on PCP and thought everyone was a demon. An older woman, early 60s, woman was driving by and he decided to fight her. Pulled her out of her car and pummeled her face. Knocked her teeth out, bruised her face real good, gave her brain damage. She was conscious throughout the entire ordeal and I was the first on scene. It shocked me because she was minding her own business when this asshole decided to ruin her life. It was random and unprovoked. If I'm not mistaken, she had to quit her job due to memory issues from the brain injury. On top of that, we had to fight the guy for a good 3 minutes until we got him into custody. He was a big guy and got roughed up pretty good, but he was feeling no pain at all. My taser had absolutely no effect. We only got him into cuffs when 6 officers held him down and pulled his arms into place. He then proceeded to spit blood on us. Not a cop, but I am in college to become one. One of my professors at the time worked homicide as a lieutenant at the precinct and brought in crime scene photos all the time to show us on the projector. One was of this 17-year-old kid who'd had his head caved in on the early 2000s. It was a pretty big case at the time in Philadelphia. He worked construction part-time and walked home every Friday with a couple $100 in cash for his pay. His best friends, 1 girl and 2 guys, all in the 16 to 18 range, wanted to make a quick buck. The girl lured him to this regular meet-up spot for sex out near some woods. When he started taking his clothes off, the 3 friends jumped him. The 18-year-old guy, if I remember right, had a hammer, and his brother had a cinder block. Kid didn't stand a chance. His parents had to identify him based on the clothes he was wearing because there was practically nothing left of his face or hands, defensive wounds. The brother got tried as an adult and got 25 to life, the 18-year-old got life, the girl got 15 for ratting out the other 2. Where do you start? What do you mean by worst? The saddest scene was a fire where a number of children had died. There is nothing as sad and disturbing as seeing a lifeless child. The most grotesque scene was an obese man who died on the toilet and fell forward onto the lino floor. He lay there for 3 days. We had to peel him off the floor, and what used to be his face and chest was now a large amount of maggots and goop. The scene that made me most angry was the home where the big fat husband had thrown his tiny wife around the place and put her head through the plasterboard of a wall. The sight of her cowering and him standing there laughing made my blood boil. Fortunately, he violently resisted arrest. He didn't think he could be arrested in his own home. The most frustrating scene was the rape victim who was too afraid to name her attackers because they were connected to the IRA. That feeling when you can do nothing to bring such a heinous man to justice. Saw a little kid standing on a busy street corner, in the dead of winter, around 2 or 3 years old. Went up to him to talk to him and found out he had been standing out there for an hour or so while a good Samaritan kept eyes on him from across the street in his nice and warm house. Eventually led the investigation back to a battered woman's shelter nearby. The manager recognized the kid and said his mom was upstairs in another room. Went up there and found out she died from a heroin overdose a few days prior. Broke my heart to think that kid had been in that room with his dead mother for days with little food or water, probably crying that his mother wouldn't wake up or talk to him. Dunno whatever happened to him after that. Lost kids are common in my city, but this one wasn't just the forgetful tourist who didn't keep track of their kid while they snapped photographs everywhere. Was intense for a while, as we pulled resources from neighboring counties to put out the alerts for a priority lost child. Not Me by my police trade school teacher told me a story of such a fucked up crime scene he was a part of. There was this beautiful woman, could have been a model. And she was naked in the floor of her hotel room, her head not attached to her body and blood everywhere. The entire hotel was a crime scene, and my teacher kept seeing cops sneak in to see the hot dead chick, and my teacher, who had command, was furious. Kicked them all out and tried to do his job. Until his higher up, I think a lieutenant, came in by asking around. I heard the hot headless chick was here. Since he was a higher rank, the second he stepped in he took command of the scene, and my teacher never did find out what happened, except some cops care about seeing a hot corpse than doing their job. My 3rd year on the job, working a housing patrol, went to a domestic. Female caller on the line screaming, getting constant updates as my partner and I run up 14 flights of stairs. We finally reached the door. I'm fucking gassed. My partner was a little Puerto Rican dude, great cop, weighed all of like a $120. He tries to boot the door and bounces off it like Wile E. Coyote. We could hear the screaming all the way down the hall as soon as we made it out of the stairwell. I give the door the boot. It's a steel security door with 3 deadbolts. Inside the apartment, it sounds like there's a legit WWE ladder match going on, with this howling, high-pitched, keen and low shouting. I kick the door at least a dozen times. I'm about to puke. My partner is screaming at me, "Boot the fucking door, man, we gotta get in there." The shouting goes up in volume and the scream goes to a shriek, constant, unwavering. Then there's no shriek, just the shouting. I finally get the door busted open. There's a woman on the floor in the middle of the entryway. It looks like she fought a bear and lost. It's the first time I've seen that much blood on the ground. The floor is a slip and slide of blood. The woman is alert, mostly, rocking herself back and forth. She reaches up to me as I make entry, "My boy, my baby boy." She just repeats it over and over. The male half rounds the corner and comes pulling at me. The fight is on. He has a meat fork in his hand. I don't even have time to draw before we make contact. He's shirtless and covered in sweat. His arms are bloody all the way up to his shoulders. He stinks of booze. Not the fresh drunk stink, but the acrid, hard stench of a habitual alcoholic. He also smells of old weed and piss. My partner is literally bouncing off the walls behind me, trying to get into the fight. I finally slam the dude on the ground. He's not huge. He's not even big, but he's got murder strength. I'm not a small dude. I can barely hang on to him. Imagine yourself fighting a shaved honey badger covered in blood and piss and sweat, in a 3-foot wide hallway, on a floor covered in sex lube. My partner finally gets into the fight, gets jabbed several times with the meat fork. My partner's nickname was Dr. Pepper. He starts yelling, "Spray, spray, spray," while I am trying to clobber the shit out of the dude with my maglite. My partner dumps a whole can on this dude, and also on me. I've been sprayed so many times by him that I am mostly used to it. I don't remember a whole lot after that, except hearing my gun. I do remember seeing the dude's right arm coming out, and I see the pistol. There are a lot of gunshots. I don't know how many were mine. Epilogue: the female victim had 47 stab wounds. She survived, although she incurred debilitating injuries. My partner was stabbed with the meat fork 3 times, twice in the right thigh and once in the right forearm. He also suffered a gunshot wound to the throat, recovered and retired last year after 20 years on the job. I took several stabs, the worst of which being my right hand and right shoulder. I still have permanent damage and loss of motor function. The suspect lived, although he is now confined to a wheelchair and uses a colostomy bag. The 4-year-old boy who was thrown out of the window while I was trying to kick the door down didn't survive. I'm still on the street. This incident was the first of the worst. I dream about them every night. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more gruesome. Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. His scalp and part of his cheek were hanging off the side of his face. People who have survived a murder attempt by dumb luck, what's your story? 3 men drugged me and kidnapped me. I woke up on a floor with one of them tearing my clothes off and my moon boot, broken foot. I tried kicking him off with the boot but he started knocking my head into the floor and I passed out. I woke up in daylight in a garbage bin, naked and in a pool of my own blood. I don't know how the hell I got out of there or how I found the nearest policeman, but I then collapsed again. Woke up in a hospital with 52 stitches in my head and 78 in and around my vulva and breasts. Doctor said it was the worst trauma she ever saw. They say it's a miracle I'm alive and don't know how I did it. They were never caught. I am a crisis, trauma and PTSD counselor now. They didn't win. I was 14 and outside in my garage petting my cat. It was November, so it was already dark by 5 p.m. Someone opened the door behind me without me hearing, grabbed me by my ponytail and started dragging me outside. They hit me on my head with a brake and knocked me out. Pulled me halfway around my house when, I'm guessing this is when, they stabbed me on the left side of my stomach. This must have brought me out of my daze, because my mom said she heard me scream from inside where she and my brother and sister were in the kitchen. They came out the front door and saw me bleeding out on the sidewalk, called 911. Had 12 stitches, double layer, a severe concussion, and whiplash. Didn't eat and hardly slept for a week. They never found him. I was exiting a bar once after last call and was with a friend who was a medic. We saw a girl laying in a snowbank near a telephone pole who had just been hit by a car. We ran over and tried to help her. Some others were already on the phone with 911 and I, not having any medical training, didn't have anything to contribute but didn't want to just leave. The whole situation was concerning. I turn around for a second and start to hear people screaming. I turn around and a minivan was heading for us. The few people around this woman, they already started to run. But I was too late. He hit me as I was trying to flee. Hit the car in reverse, ran over me again. And then went forward and run over me a third time. Turns out the guy was high and drunk and got into a fight with the woman's boyfriend, whom I bared a strong resemblance to. He thought I was him. Not to throw a pity party for myself, but 9 years later I have a ton of medical issues, and my life pretty much started on a downward spiral since then. But sure, I guess I survived. My husband and I live above our place of business. Our alarm company called us at 3 a.m. to say there was a motion detect alert, just one, in a weird place. We assumed it was a mouse but went to reset and check it out. Husband ended up face to face with a burglar who was on his way out the window he had broken. He ran back inside. I called 911 and we heard mad chaos going on in the depths of the building. So much crashing and smashing. Burglar monkey climbed a 10-iron gate, bodily smashed through 2 sets of commercial-grade glass doors and was outside again. My husband was like, yeah, F this dude, tore after him and tackled him. He got him on the ground and pinned him. Bear in mind the whole time I'm narrating to 911, and chasing around in panties and tank top. I was a bit behind my husband, in the middle of the street about 15 feet away when a minivan squealed around the corner. It was his girlfriend and getaway driver. I luckily missed it. I was super focused on reading the license plate, which was one of those cutesy font out of state ones and therefore hard to read, but she yelled, "Get the hell off him or I'm running your witch over." Then she tried to. The audio and video I had to watch for the trial was horrifying. I had blocked it out nearly completely, and really didn't remember how close it was. She guns the engine at me. I throw my hands up in front of my face when I realize what she's doing and scream, and jump out of the way with inches to spare. He jumped in and off they went. He bled all over my husband, yikes, and eventually the DNA and the partial plate info nailed them. They're both in prison. Addendum, trials suck. I was riding in a train across Eastern Europe. I was running low on money, and even though I had been warned that a woman should not travel alone in second-class seating, I did not spring for first class. I was sitting alone in one of the compartments that seats 6. This was also a mistake and a very stupid one to sit alone. Eventually the train stopped and a man got on. He was very drunk. He came into my compartment and I guess he thought I looked like his ex-wife. He attacked me. If it were not for the fact that this particular station was the border between 2 countries, I would be dead. Instead, border patrol from both countries were on the train, and while I was unable to scream, the door was open and at least a half a dozen uniformed men jumped him and saved me. I was in the hospital for a little while but recovered. At one point during the trial, one of the cops asked me if I wanted him and his buddies to hold the guy down while I hit him. I thought he was joking. So I said, "No, go ahead, you do it." I was also joking. But it turns out they took it seriously and were about to. I did put a stop to that at least. But they were so offended that someone from their country would attack a young female American tourist. They were furious with him. So many people there depended upon tourism. My supposed best friend decided that my wife and I were too perfect. Therefore it must all be an act, and I was obviously abusing her. He was at our house after I made an awesome dinner and we were having fun drinking and singing karaoke. I went to the kitchen to put some glasses away, came back and leaned on the couch with him slightly behind me to the left of me. Then I heard a thunk and felt an amazing amount of pain on the top of my head. He had picked up the whiskey bottle on the table and smashed it into my skull. I was very confused as to what the hell was happening. Then the blood started pouring. I didn't want to get blood everywhere, so I went to the kitchen. Dude is pacing back and forth saying weird shit. I thought about my gun, which was close by, but I wasn't thinking quite straight. He left. I had a huge concussion and still suffer side effects from it. My number 2 goal in life is to live longer than that butt-hat just so I can shit on his grave. Well, my mom got mad at me when I was 20 and I didn't give her money for her birthday, which I'm assuming was to pay off drug dealers of hers. So she stabbed me between the ribs. Ended up getting stuck in the bone and had to get it taken out in surgery. Throw away because it got some media. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I was representing this guy that had embezzled almost $500,000 from his business partner. He was looking down the barrel at several years in prison, a bunch of his assets had been seized by the government, was being sued by multiple creditors for north of $2 million, and was in the midst of an ugly divorce and wasn't allowed to see his kids. I was one of 3 lawyers he had, criminal, civil and divorce. He was drinking a lot and using coke. I used to get this incoherent phone calls in the middle of the night that ranged from threats to crying. He came to my office one day and asked for me, but I was in court. My secretary said he was perfectly civil. He then went to his divorce lawyer's office and shot him to death. Got stopped by the police a short distance away and was wounded in a shootout. He would later tell the cops that he had come to my office to shoot me that day and also planned to shoot his civil attorney. I, 18 and female back then, now 25, was on my way home at night after meeting a friend. My home was just 10 minutes away from the train station. After a few minutes I felt someone following me. No big deal, I thought, just someone else walking home. But I started walking faster. I realized the person behind me was catching up. Weird. In my head I started to make up scenarios of how to defend myself if the person would attack me. Never would I think of this to actually happen. Well, until I felt something on the back of my head, hitting me hard. I went furious. I turned around and attacked the guy. My mind was just full of anger towards this stranger who, what I thought, hit me. We were wrestling until I fell on the ground. He was sitting on top of me, strangling me. I tried to crawl my nails into his eyes as deep as I could, but I started to black out. Suddenly there was this thought in my head, wake up, or you will die. Well, adrenaline kicked in again and I opened my eyes and screamed at the top of my lungs, attacking him again. That helped. He stood up and began to run. I laid there for a few seconds, then I started to run home, still screaming. My mom was already at our door and opened for me because my screams woke her up, or her mother's senses, who knows. She immediately called the cops and they could arrest him on the same night. It turned out that he actually shot me in my head from behind. They assumed that the gun didn't work properly, the bullet didn't penetrate my skull and stuck in there, but as far as I know they never found out why the gun misfired. I'm glad though. He told the cops that he already followed me a few times in the past, but never had the guts to do it. He wanted to kill me and snatch my dead body. I know that's a wild story. I have some Swiss newspaper articles as a source if someone cares though.
She has eluded your soldiers for 19 days.
She's public enemy #1 in Gilead.
They're gonna find her. They're gonna kill her.
I ask for justice.
I had a guy high on both meth and acid break into my apartment in college. Somehow he was convinced he lost his glasses inside. I'm doing dishes when my door gets slammed open. Next thing I know he is behind me. I'm being choked to death in my kitchen. As I was losing consciousness I grabbed my roommate's acrylic bong and frantically swung over my shoulder into his face. The bong broke but did nothing as the guy was choking me even harder. So I swung it again. Because the bong broke the first time I was hitting the guy with a 6-inch claw of acrylic glass. Afterward his scalp and part of his cheek were hanging off the side of his face. Essentially I scalped him with a bong. So I chased the guy out of my house. There is easily 2 feet of snow outside. He tries walking back to his house through a cemetery as a shortcut, seriously. And he passes out in the cemetery. The police only found him because I called the cops and they followed the blood and footprints through the snow. And that's the part I was surprised about the most. I hit the guy on his scalp. There isn't much blood in the scalp compared to most of the body. But my kitchen was covered in blood. His blood was on my refrigerator, counter, floor and ceiling. It was almost as traumatic to clean it. My roommates were gone for winter break. Thank God my roommate's girlfriend came over and helped me. Now as for the guy. The cops couldn't charge him for 2 days because he needed blood transfusions. He was charged with assault, breaking and entering and attempted murder. And he definitely had drugs on him too, not sure what he got convicted of but he went to jail for 4 years. If you're from the area I'm from this will probably sound familiar. But I got absolutely blackout drunk at an end of the graduation party and ended up having to get taken home early. Later that night another student at the party ended up stabbing and killing 5 people. Turns out he had mental issues, schizophrenia, and thought everyone at the party was a werewolf or vampire who threatened his life. He never went to jail but ended up being found non-criminally responsible instead. Mine's not extreme by any chance but a couple of years ago my brother and I went to walk the dog at like 11 p.m. We left through the side gate. I live on a corner, and right as we exit I see this weird looking dude at the corner of the footpath walking weirdly towards us. Got bad vibes and told my brother to get the dog and get back inside. This dude is walking kind of side on and hiding something in his hand behind his back. As I'm getting my brother through the gate the dude says something like, "Boy mate, can I come in? I need a blanket, I'm freezing." I just ignored him and went inside and locked the door. We then get a call from the people who live 2 doors up. The same dude knocked on their door and their 10-year-old son opened it to see the dude holding a hatchet. Anyway, I'm glad I went with my gut on that one. I was around 20 to 21 years old and walking home at about 3 a.m. after a night out and I was absolutely plastered from drinking so much. I was about 200 meters from my house when a hooded figure jumped out from behind a bush and immediately had a knife pushing into my stomach as he grabbed my neck and tried pulling me in. Fortunately I was stronger and pulled away. He went to lunge at me with the knife when suddenly he stopped. Stared for what felt like an eternity but was probably a second or two and then said, "You lost. Holy hell, I haven't seen you in so long, my bad mate," and then walked off like nothing had happened. I still don't know who he was to this day. Chilling with the brothers drinking at a park. As we drive off to leave, a car coming our way almost hits us. Driver obviously reacts like what the hell and I guess the other car noticed. They turned around and caught up to us at a stop sign. Other driver asked if we had a problem. We told them stop driving like a-holes. Then their back window rolls down and 2 guys in the back draw Glocks with drum magazines. We just kind of froze up at first but then our driver pulled off hastily. Later found out those guys got arrested for shooting someone else that same day. In my late teens, I used to buy my weed from random dudes in the projects, low-income housing. One day we gave some money to a guy named 40. He took it and went inside one of the buildings. We waited in the car for several minutes. We started to think he had taken our money and left. Right about that time, a car full of coked up white dudes pulled up beside ours. Apparently my friend owed him money. They pointed a gun at him and said that if he had enough money to buy weed, then he could pay them back. I really thought they were going to shoot us and just drove off like it was nothing, and I hadn't even done anything wrong. I thought I was gonna pee my pants. Right about that time, 40 came back out with our weed and an even bigger gun. He scared them away and then we went back to his apartment and smoked a blunt. What a good man. Turns out he was only selling weed because he had a 6-year-old daughter and that was the only way he knew to give her a better life than he had. I babysat his daughter occasionally for the rest of that summer. I really hope she got a decent childhood and that her dad stayed safe and out of jail. When I was 2 weeks into my first job as a 16-year-old, at a smoothie establishment that should be known to NBA fans, we were robbed. It was late, and my co-workers' friends had been playing pranks on her all day, so when I saw someone burst through the door, I thought it was just that. Until, that is, I had something metal pressed against my back and an arm wrapped around my chest. The robber gave the whole stereotypical give me all the money spiel, and ordered us to go into the back room, kneel down, and face the wall. As I was kneeling and hearing him walking towards us, time seemed to slow down. Thankfully, I had been refilling juices whenever he came in, and so the door to the back room was partially blocked by a heavy card. With whatever substance he was on, he wasn't coordinated enough to get past it to us, so he fled. He was followed by my coworker's husband and caught. When he was caught, they found an industrial-sized pipe wrench wrapped tightly in his fist, so that he could get a stronger grip when swinging. I'm so glad that cart was there. Once a year or so, I would look him up in the parish prison roster to see if he was still in jail. One year, he suddenly wasn't. I later found him named in a lawsuit as having stabbed his cellmate a half-dozen times while the guy was asleep. Definitely doesn't seem like the nicest of people. 9 years later, I'm still unpacking this incident in therapy. It's why I don't like walking around cities at night or sitting where I can't see the door. This all happened many years ago. I was a lead man at a factory. A girl starts working there, and I take an interest. After a few months, I find out she is in a terrible drug-fueled abusive relationship. Every night, I tell her to call me, I'll come get her. Finally, after months, she calls me, I come get her and take her to my house. The guy she was in the relationship with didn't take too kindly to me taking her away. He spends the next 2 years harassing and threatening us. A few months after she and I got married, we went out for a few drinks. Her ex just happened to be at the bar we went to. He apologized to us for the threats and harassment. We were sitting outside talking with a few other people. Next thing I know, I'm on my back on the ground with someone choking me. I try all I can to get them off of me, but being blindsided and them being on top of me, it wasn't easy. As I struggle to get free, everything goes black, then I see the light at the end of the tunnel. In that moment I was certain that this was the end of me. I somehow managed to get a better hold of this person's head, and I yanked them off of me. We run to the car and get away. A week or so later, my wife had been talking to everyone she thinks might know what happened. Turns out, her ex had paid 2 people $50 to kill me that night.
You lost, Zoe.
I was doing volunteer work in Central America, working in a really bad area of the capital city. It was a slum built on top of the city's garbage dump. The whole place reeked of trash, and there were large metal cylinders coming up out of the ground throughout the area to vent the gas from decomposing garbage underground. As a fellow volunteer, I walked down a dirt path. Two men approached us. I'd never seen them before. They were acting strangely, but I just thought they were drunk or high. A lot of people in the area drank rubbing alcohol to get drunk, since it was cheaper than beer or liquor. Over time, drinking the rubbing alcohol would really mess with their brains. As the men got closer, they began acting really friendly, too friendly. One of them came close to me, trying to put his arm around my shoulders. At first, it seemed like the behavior of a guy who gets happy and friendly when he's drunk. However, an alarm went off in my head, and I gently, but firmly, pushed him away. I tried to make it seem lighthearted and playful, like, "Hey, man, how's it going?" Affectionate shove. I didn't want to make a scene. Since I was a gringo, I didn't want to seem like an ugly American. This went on over and over down the whole path. He'd get close, I'd shove him off. He'd come close again. Finally, my friend and I came to a fork in the path, and we went one way while they went another. After we got to the house of some people we knew, we told them about the two guys. I was so focused on protecting myself, I didn't even notice much of what was happening with the other guy. They said, "Oh, everyone around here knows him. That's his routine. He comes up to people, pretends to be friendly, puts his arm around them, then pulls out his knife and stabs them in the stomach." I was that close to getting stabbed to death. I was abducted at a gas station during undergrad. The locks on my car were broken, and as soon as I got back in, a strange man came in and forced me to drive him to an ATM. I am paralyzed with fear, so any sense or reason I had went out the window. He claimed he worked at Wendy's, and for my generosity he would give me all the Wendy's I ever wanted. On the way to the ATM he showed me pictures of his daughters, on his clearly stolen cell phone. Then a Whitney Houston song came on the radio and he starts bawling his eyes out and screaming, "Why do all the good people have to die? Only bad things should happen to bad people." I go to the ATM, take out cash, give it to him thinking it's over. He then makes me get back in the car and drive him somewhere else. We passed by some train tracks and I'm thinking, this is it. This is where I will be murdered. He asks me what I'm studying in school, and I tell him biochemistry. I believe in jet propulsion and all that stuff. We are not alone, aliens are among us. He then makes me pull over at a gas station and he tells me, "Drive away, sweetheart." I call the cops, head to do lineup. Apparently this dude had done this to a ton of other women, and some were less unscathed than I was. When I was a kid I was riding my bike home from a friend's house at sunset. I rode past the community pool, which had been closed for a couple months. There was a car in the lot with a guy in it. I didn't think much of it as I continued the trek home. I cut through the local elementary parking lot, which has gates. I get like 20 yards past the gate and I see that car pull up at the bottom. Thinking that's odd. Anyhow, he backs out away from the gate. My spidey senses were kinda tingling at this point. I get up to the school and head towards teacher parking lot, which is my standard direction. As I'm about to turn the corner I see headlights from the parking lot. I stop and peek around the corner and it's that guy again. I flip my bike around and start going the long way around the school. He sees me but just gets back in his car and starts driving around the front of the school. I camp in these bushes, heart pounding. He is slowly driving up and down the front of the school, keeping an eye on the teacher's lot. Another car comes down the street and he has to move his dumb car out of their way. As soon as he does, I just blasted up to the street and full tilt flew my bike into some random open garage. So I'm hiding in the garage waiting for him to come around again. But he doesn't. I give it a few minutes, then decide to pop my head out. Still no one. Okay, I'm a few blocks from home, just gotta go for it. Bust out the bike and start hauling home. Not half a block later this dude turns the corner on me. I just veer my bike into some random lawn and run up to the front door. I look at him and he's just in the street staring at me. I grip the front door handle, praying to any and every god these people don't lock their doors. I see his reverse lights flicker and I know he just put it in park. I just rip the door open, run inside and slam it. Two old people just sitting there. I look at them and I'm like, some dude is trying to get me out there. They don't completely believe me cause they barely react to what I said. But they don't kick me out or anything either. I'm watching the dude from their window and he's just chilling. Then the grandpa looking dude gets up from his lazy boy and opens the curtain to look for himself. When he does this the butthead in the car just leaves. Old guy is like, well, looks like he's gonna leave. I'm like I'm not leaving for a bit. So I hang out for 10 minutes and no creepy abductor car to be seen. I assume he figured I called the cops. Finally I'm like I have to get home. This is before cell phones were common for average people. I hop on my bike and I swear it felt like I drove 35 miles per hour the whole way home. Get home and tell my parents. I'm exhausted and in complete shock. They basically brush me off. I'm stunned that every adult I interacted with acted like I was crazy. I basically never talked about it again. It was so traumatic to talk about at the time. That image of him in his car while I held the door handle to the random house is permanently seared into my brain. To this day it's still as crystal clear as if it happened yesterday. Like 18 to 20 years later I decided to confront my parents as to why they didn't do anything that day. They were like, what the hell are you talking about? I explained it far better than I could have when I was a kid in complete shock. Anyhow, with the current, more expansive explanation my mother broke down. She started crying at this public restaurant because she saw how serious I was when I was like, how could you ignore what I said that day? As well as talked about how that morphed my stranger danger techniques for better or worse. Thankfully I was on the verge of puberty and ended up becoming a giant human being, so my actual fears diminished quickly as I could defend myself. Until I moved away from the town, however, I looked every day for the goddamn car. Never saw it again. I would fantasize about what I'd like to do if I ever found that guy. Hell, I still do. Was a bouncer at a club in LA for a minute in the 90s. Stopped some dudes clearly affiliated, in a gang, at the door after they refused security checks. After a few minutes of their threats and Manson lamps they left spewing all sort of warnings. A little later it starts to wind down, and because it's a little slow and we're overstaffed, so I start to drink. I get a bit drunk, not wasted, but sleepy buzzed, so I tell my buddy I'm going to go lay down in the back of his car for a while. A few minutes after lying down I realize I have to pee. I get out and stumble a few into a spot between a guard gate, for a parking lot, and a building for a little privacy. There's a few dozen people milling around in front of the club. I'm about 25 feet away from the club's entrance and just off an alleyway. While I'm relieving myself, a dude runs right past in front of me, around the guard booth to my rear, and unloads a 9mm, recovered rounds from back seat, trunk, roof, bumper, into the back seat of the car I just crawled out of. Bam 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 bam. Unloading into the car. He then turns, runs right back past me, and down the alley into the night. Don't think he saw me at all. Nothing really came of it. Except my partner was convinced I was a marked man and refused to be near me for a year or so.
She has eluded your soldiers for 19 days.
She's public enemy number one in Gilead.
Sophomore year of college, went with a friend to go hang out at his old college. We were supposed to crash with a few friends of his, but we met a few ladies and ended up at a pool party. Next day I went home and my friend started getting calls from one of his buddies' moms asking if he'd seen him. Turns out in the middle of the night a few guys broke into the house, kidnapped my friend's buddy and roommate, took their car and drove them out to the middle of nowhere and executed them. I guess it was part of some gang initiation. I was supposed to sleep there with my friend. I still sometimes think about it and get the shivers. I was 15 to 16, at a party. I went outside on a balcony for a smoke with someone I was talking to, and there was already a guy out there. We chatted as a group, and the friend went back inside. I started chatting with the guy who was already out there, who seemed a little funny. He started talking about how he was in the army for a little bit but got kicked out, then pulled out a big knife and handed it to me. I looked at it and gave it back to him. At that point he pushed me against the edge of the balcony, put the knife to my neck, looked me in the eye, and said, "Do you know why I wanted to join the army? I wanted to kill people, man. People just like you." He then made a slicing sound with his mouth and took the knife away, then started laughing. I went inside, grabbed my girlfriend, and we locked ourselves in a bedroom. He ended up smoking a lot of meth that night and was kneeing holes in the wall and beating on the door. I slept with my knife under my pillow. The next morning he seemed totally normal, except for the fact that he had turned his jeans into short shorts. Scary looking back on it. My wife, my kids and myself went to church one time and we ran into one of my wife's old flings. This guy followed my wife around and our daughter and kept trying to talk to them. So I confronted him about it and told him to back off. As we were leaving he makes sure to yell across the parking lot telling my daughter goodbye. My wife forces me into the car and we leave. So I messaged the guy on Facebook to ask him what his problem is, and he tells me that my wife and daughter are his friends and I have no right to tell them who to be friends with. I told him again to back off or I would call the police. Fast forward a week, I worked every other Sunday. I get a call from the pastor saying that they had to call the police on the guy because he was causing drama looking for me. When they arrested him, he had a backpack with him that had a sawed-off shotgun, a meth pipe and some meth in it. Thank God for my nosy neighbors. I always used to hate how nosy they were. Until this happened. When I was about 10, I was riding my bike outside. My parents always let me ride my bike outside during the summer, but only up and down the street we were on. One day, a man in a van was parked across the street. He called me, asking me if I had seen his dog and could help him find it. Me, being a dumb child, offered to help him find it, and I started walking towards his van. My neighbor, an older white lady, came bolting out of her house hooting and yelling, telling the guy to back off. The dude got back in his car in a hurry and took off, and it wasn't until many years later that I realized how bad that situation could have been. I have a friend who had a party at his parents' house when he was in high school that a ton of random people went to. He got super drunk during the party and went upstairs to go to sleep, knowing that his friends would watch the party for him. My friend woke up from his nap to a guy from his school sitting on top of him stabbing him to death. He was stabbed 7 times before it stopped and he laid there on the bed dying. The only reason he is still alive is because his best friend came upstairs to ask him if it was alright if he made a frozen pizza and found him. The assailant was put in jail and recently was released, and it scares me to know that a guy who wanted to know what it would feel like to kill someone, said during the trial, is still out there free. I was pushed off a cliff by a former friend at his own birthday party. He was 14 and I was like 12. We were on a hike, just the two of us, and he took a detour and we reached a steep cliff and he just up and pushed me off. I caught onto a tree root that was jutting out. There was a big tree growing right where I fell. The root grew in a way that part of it was exposed and made a surprisingly good handle. He didn't catch on and simply left me there. I was there for about an hour if I had to guess, until someone else was alerted to my presence and managed to get me back up. I still have nightmares about it. I don't know why he did it, but he had been an insane a-hole to me for a long time in retrospect. Nobody believed me when I told this to them, so he got off scot-free. I haven't seen him since, but I'm pretty sure he's still alive. About 10 years ago I used to share a 3-bedroom apartment with a friend, so we had a spare room. At some point he told me he had met some nice guy, who was older and a philosophy book translator, and he was looking for a place. I thought the extra money would be nice, so I was okay with it. So the guy moves in. He's very reclusive, so we don't talk much, but I start to get a weird vibe from him. One day I had to go to work meeting about 3 hours earlier than normal, so I woke up, dressed and left. He and my other friend had already left, so the apartment was left unattended. The meeting was over sooner than I anticipated, so I decided I would have lunch at home. When I arrive at the building, there's a fire truck in the streets, and the doorman runs towards me as soon as he sees me, telling that there was a gas leak in my apartment and they had to cut the gas to the whole building, and they were about to break into the apartment to check. When I enter the apartment I immediately smell the gas, and when I go check the kitchen I see all the stove's valves open. I called my friend and told him what happened. He called the other guy and he didn't answer. I went to check his bedroom and it was empty. The guy just left with all his stuff and tried to asphyxiate me while I slept. I didn't pursue it, and we never heard of the guy again.
Round 3.
Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more creepy videos. Click the right box for the Creepy Ass Reddit videos playlist. Let us know in the comments what you think about these stories. They get shy and overly conscious of what they're saying. What screams "I have a crush on you"? They're happier to see you specifically, even though they can barely hold a conversation with you. I was friends with a girl that I had a huge crush on but was too much of a wimp to do anything about it. During high school swim practice she used to wave at me and want to talk to me every day. I thought she was waving to one of my best friends who everyone knew she liked the year before. She even specifically came up to me and told me she was waving to me and was happy to see me. I couldn't take a hint. Still bothers me a little to this day. There was a girl who worked at a cafe who had a crush on me. Sometimes when I would start heading out, she would say, "Come on, stay a while longer. I'll buy you some nachos." That's pretty hard to turn down. So she'd buy some nachos on employee discount and make a badass plate of nachos, and then we'd sit and share it. Yeah, that's crush territory. Literally everyone as soon as you get a girlfriend. Because now you got confidence.
What's your horror story with bad parenting from strangers? I used to work at a sandwich shop and there was a man in line with his son. The little boy was a bit bouncy and kept tugging on the man's arm saying, "Daddy, I need to potty real bad," and the dad would say, "In a minute, son." This went on for like 5 minutes and the little boy says, "Daddy, I have to potty now," and the man all of a sudden turns to the son and backhands him across the face and yells at him, "I told you to wait a goddamn minute," and the boy bursts into tears. My manager was right there and she was in a fury. She started yelling at the guy that he was an butthole and a horrible person, and she told him to get the frick out of her store and never come back. The guy was like, "Mind your own business. This is my kid and I can do what I want," and she said, "Leave now before I call the police." So the man hitched the boy up by his arm and practically dragged him out of the store. The worst part? They were less than 10 feet from the bathroom the entire time. That poor kid. I hope the kid let loose and pee all over him when the dad picked him up. Used to babysit for a very dysfunctional family. The mum got knocked up on purpose so the dad wouldn't leave her. Subsequently, the dad hated the mum and resented the child. I know this because they fought about it often, publicly, and in front of the child. When I would arrive, the baby would always have a very dirty diaper that had obviously been left like that for many hours. The baby's first word was her own name, and then my name. Not Mama or Dada, her own freaking 3-syllable name. One day, the child had no milk or baby food left, and the mom goes to the store and comes back with just a pack of cigarettes. I asked her why she didn't get anything for the baby and she said, "Well, I didn't have enough for both, and I don't get paid till Friday." It was Wednesday, and she was just gonna let the kid go hungry for 3 days. There was nothing edible in the house. I freaking lost it. I don't think I have ever raged out on somebody so bad in my entire life. I let her have it for a good 10 minutes, screaming at the top of my lungs the litany of reasons why she was a failure as a parent and how I was gonna call CPS if things didn't change. Anyways, she burst into tears and took the cigarettes back and came home with milk. So I guess it kinda worked. I ended up making pureed veggies at home and bringing them to the little girl for the rest of the week. They moved away shortly after that and I always wonder what happened to the little girl. I was 16 at the time. Good for you. Some people deserve a good reality check. I teach first graders and I'm convinced most parents should not be raising children. Here's my most recent story. One day I start afternoon class and I ask my students how they are doing. One girl says bad and I ask her why. She says that she's hungry because she didn't eat lunch. I ask her why she hasn't had lunch yet and she says it's because her mom was playing on the computer and she forgot to feed and then didn't have time. How the heck do you forget to feed a 7-year-old? Later I brought her a snack when I had a minute because there's no way I could let a kid go without food. I recently had an encounter from the other end of the spectrum. I was cycling through the downtown area when I passed this Chinese lady who let a tiny kid, I'm guessing about 4 or 5 years old, walk on the street side of her. And just as I pass, this kid is making some excited gestures at his mom, happily jabbering about something while simultaneously pretty much running backward right into the side of me. While I'm cycling at full speed, he goes flying backwards. I'm pretty sure I hit him right in the face with my knee. I stop horrified to check if the kid is okay. He's making this face like he's inhaling a huge breath of air to start bawling. But before I can get off the bicycle or he can start screaming, his mom looks back, sees what's going on and just snips a few words of Chinese at him. The kid just looks at her, instantly regains his composure with obvious effort. I'm pretty sure he's hurt and he quietly runs up to her. The lady just smiles and waves at me and walks off at a brisk pace with her kid. And I'm just left standing there looking completely stumped at the bystanders who seem just as confused. That kid is going to grow up tough, even if it kills him. I'm pretty sure his mom is going to make sure of that. I approve of this parent. I used to work at a crappy gas station convenience store. One day a woman come up to the counter with her daughter. She places on the counter hot dogs, hot dog buns, Kraft mac and cheese, 6-pack of Corona. She then asks me for a pack of cigarettes. After ringing up all the items, she swipes her debit card and it doesn't go through. She tries several times. After about the 4th time, she turns to this little girl, who couldn't be older than 6, and I crap you not. She says looks like you won't be eating tonight, and walks away leaving her little girl at the counter tearing up. I was dumbfounded, and before I could say anything, the little girl yells to me you're a big meanie and ran out the door crying. Worst Thanksgiving ever. I hate it when parents use their kids for scams and shoplifting. Glad you didn't get taken. About a fortnight ago at the local markets, I watched a chap blow cigarette smoke into his child's face and call him an A repeatedly. The child was preschool age. I was at a loss as to what I could have done, but at the same time regret doing nothing. While queuing in a coffee shop in England, 2 police officers walked in the door and went up to the agitated looking woman in front of me. They started questioning her about her son, asking when she had last seen him, how old he was, what he was wearing, etc. So it was fairly evident from the conversation that she had quite recently lost her 6-year-old kid. Both officers kept confusedly looking around the shop until the woman felt obliged to explain why she was in there, saying I'm gonna look for him. I'm getting me and my husband a coffee first. Go on ahead, we'll catch up. After picking up my order, I turned around to see them both sitting at a table drinking their coffees like not even a single frick was given. As I walked out the door I saw the woman peer out the front window, looking for her son I suppose. Dang. I think Adam Sandler said it best in Billy Madison. When you lose your dog you don't just put up a few signs and look around for an hour. You get off your butt and find that dang dog. I doubt I quoted him correctly but that's the gist of it. Once saw a teenage mother on the bus going crazy at her son having a tantrum, and at one point she squawked I'm gonna shave an S in your head. S for psychotic. I should shave an E for illiterate. I was at the store with my dad and we see this woman take her baby's bottle and pour Mountain Dew into it before giving it back to the kid. This is a baby, no more than a year old. My dad goes up to the lady and asks if she really just gave Mountain Dew to the kid and she replies, yeah he likes it so I give it to him. I always give him what he wants. I fear for that generation. I was at the mall once and there was a young family in front of me. The little brat in the high chair didn't like the cheeseburger from McDonald's they got him so he wailed and screamed and then picked up the cheeseburger and threw it at the dad, painting his shirt with mustard and ketchup. The dad then went up and got the kid another meal. I remember thinking, if I did that to my dad, I wouldn't have made it out of the mall alive. Saw a kid, probably 5-6, walking with his dad to soccer practice. They walk to one pitch, and there's no one there, and the kid says oh, sorry, we're over there, pointing to another field maybe 150 yards away. The dad slaps the kid on the back of the head and says you stupid see. Some kids have no chance. Ah, childhood. I went to a barbecue thrown by a friend of a friend. There a woman showed up with her ex-husband and his new girlfriend. All 3 were drunk and a bit too friendly with each other while alternating name calling. B sucker butthole. With them was a 2 or 3 year old little girl. Cute as can be with a real light about her. I vaguely remember them telling very inappropriate stories when the little girl says she is hungry. The father goes and gets the bag of McDonald's he had been grazing out of and pulls out an earful container of fries. He proceeds to grab a few and throw them on the fricking lawn. The girl without missing a beat runs around picking them up of the lawn dirt and eats them. He repeats this over and over in front of all the other adults who didn't seem to take issue. It was like a game to him that he was clearly enjoying. Mom even smiled at it. My wife and I promptly left the party. TLDR. Dad feeds daughter like she's a dog. TLDR. Dad feeds daughter like a chicken. I am seething with anger over this one. Freaking horrific. I was lining up at the register at some store and there was a girl, 10ish, and her mum in front of me. And the little girl asked her mum if she can get the Harry Potter books because they are on sale and the mum replies, why do you need the stupid books for? We've got a big telly you can watch the movies on. Or there was another time when a little boy asks his mum for a hug and the mother slapped him from distracting her while she was counting money. Slightly off topic, maybe, but your first example reminds me of Matilda. Maybe that little girl will foil us all.
Time to have everything you love. Time to have Hulu.
Everything I love, like Last Sports and Family Guy?
Everything I
Round
love, including me?
Every drama that I love is on Hulu?
I worked at the YMCA in Houston, and we did programs that reached lower income neighborhoods, the kind full of crime and poverty, etc. One day we were letting the kids go, and we watched the rides leave as a security issue. One of the kids had made a drawing earlier that he was particularly proud of, and showed it to his dad, gleaming. The dad immediately snatched it out of the boy's hand, ripped the drawing up and smacked the kid, in full view of his employees. He went on about how he shouldn't be doing no F crap like drawing, and smacked him a couple more times. Needless to say, we called the authorities and he was arrested for child abuse or something similar. I've been a nanny for a little over 5 years, so I've seen my fair share of crazy families, but there's one babysitting job that sticks out more than any other. My ex's mom referred me to her hairdresser, so when she called me I was pretty excited to go to her house and watch a 4-year-old boy that everyone raved about being so adorable and fun. He sure was cute, but fun is not the word I would use to describe that night. She left telling me she would be home anywhere between 10 PM and 2 AM. Came home at 4 AM and got mad at me for falling asleep on the couch. The kid had the worst headache I have ever experienced before, and there was absolutely no food or drink, other than margarita mix and a 2-week-old half-gallon of milk, which he said he drank earlier that day, in the fridge. All of the sippy cups that they owned smelled like rotten eggs. I felt so bad for this boy. I looked through every drawer to see if I could find anything to give to him, and all I managed to find was workout supplements. Steroids, needles, lots of different pills like phentermine and ephedrine. I bought him some dinner, got them a fresh gallon of milk, and never came back to that house again. You should have called social services and explained the situation. We went to a soft play center with my niece the other day. One boy managed to find this big red ball and jam it at the bottom of the slide. His little brother then proceeded to go down the slide and get stuck. Chaos ensued for a while as they tried to get the boy out. The parents were effing and jeffing away at the staff. Eventually they swindled a free brew out of the place. Then, they gave their daughter a lollipop. No food is allowed in the actual play area. She ran around the play area and climbed the stairs to come down the slide. We were watching all of this whilst keeping an eye on my niece, basically getting her to stay out of the way. The parents made barely an effort to get the lolly off her. She then went into this little viewing thing made of perspex with the lolly in her mouth and was dribbling. Her drool proceeded to drip down to where we were sitting. We left promptly after being completely grossed out. They are by far the scrotiest family I have ever come across, and a very good argument for contraception. She now has headless also. I once saw the Queen of Chavs at a shopping center in the UK. She was talking to her friend, smoking her cigarette, and her little girl, maybe about 4-5 years old, starts asking for a hug. The mum ignored her for a bit and then suddenly bends down, blows a huge puff of smoke in the kid's face and shrieks, "Charmaine, I'm Avin or F." I didn't know which was worse, what she had just done or that she had called her kid Charmaine. I call it a Charmaine cause I think it's exotic. In high school I made friends with this really shy guy who stuttered and was generally socially awkward, but really nice. He was also a genius pianist. He was taking 2 years for one at his piano courses. He was composing amazing pieces at the age of 16, and I truly admired his ability. His parents, however, didn't see it that way. They were both engineers and they considered his love for music despicable, worthless, and a bad habit that needs to be uprooted. When he was practicing at home they tossed old shoes at him and they made him sleep on the floor if he played for more than 2 hours. Once a professor from the musical academy called them to tell them they have an amazing son and that he could be famous one day. They hung up the phone. When high school was over, he really wanted to apply to the musical academy, but they didn't let him. They said that the only courses they would ever fund were the ones in math and geography, the qualifying subjects for the economy university, so he had to go there for his higher education. I haven't seen him in a while, but I heard he went abroad. I hope he escaped those idiots for good. Not my story, but have a friend who is a teacher, so I hear all kind of depressing crap. Think this is the worst. A young girl's third grade mother was a prostitute and would bring guys back to the house and have 3 ways with the young child involved. She would only talk to my friend and she tried to help the best she could. Despite physical marks, bruising, child services never did anything despite many attempts at help. Fast forward a couple years, the girl is out of my friend's school but finds out one night the girl, probably 8-9, just loses it and beats the living crap out of her mother almost to death. Cops show up and arrest the child and ends up in a juvenile prison for assault. The mother is paralyzed and living on the taxpayer dime. My friend came over and cried non-stop when she found out and felt like she had failed the child. This is just one of many stories. This is why I have more respect for teachers. Teaching is almost secondary to all the stuff they have to deal with. My mum is a teacher at a primary school in England in a really bad part of town, Wokingham. The stories she brings home are appalling. From kids who have never been read to or even talked to much who come to school age 5 without being able to speak in proper sentences. Also, the saddest things often involve parenting from the previous generation. The standout event being a mother who came into my mother, the music teacher, and SBS, that she doesn't know any nursery rhymes to sing to her children, which was one of the set tasks for bonding type homeworks. She spent an hour with that woman teaching her Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Makes me happy to know she was at least trying to succeed where her parents failed though. If you don't wear these pink shoes I'm buying for you, I'm going to cut all your rabbits' heads off. Sadly, that was actually my dad talking to a 10-year-old me in a thrift store. He then proceeded to get into an argument with a woman who said you are the most horrible person I have ever heard in my life and called her a man-hater and lesbian. Before we finally left, compared to some of the other stuff that's relatively mild. Yeah, frick my childhood. I was at a movie theater and we had just walked in and sat down in our seats since the theater we were going to was open. An employee, probably around 35 years old, walks in and asks everyone, a small handful of people, to leave for a few minutes so he can clean it. He had a stutter and had some type of disability. The employee was super friendly and nice about having to ask us to all leave. This dad, lobstery, beer belly, cut off sleeves, who was there with his 3 preteen and teen kids, started making fun of the employee and the way he spoke, joking, mimicking and trying to get his kids to join in with him. I bitched that sucker out.
Feel like you live a lot of your life online? The average person is connected almost 7 hours a day. And all that shopping, banking, browsing, and sharing can mean exposing your personal information. In fact, 64% of adults admit to risking online privacy for convenience. Is it any wonder that 26% of people had malware on one of their devices? Or that there's a victim of identity theft every
Mid-20s man enters bodega with son, maybe 5 years old. Man, go get what you want. Kid runs to cold case, gets small container of milk, runs back, is just tall enough to put it on the counter. Man, what is that crap? You said you were thirsty. Go get something else. Kid takes milk, puts it back in cold case, gets a Pepsi, bring it back to father. Man, okay. Put it on the counter. I worked as a waitress for about 4 years. One family was very rude and demanding every time they ate there. Their children, 5-10-year-old range, would snap at me or shake their cups to get my attention. When we didn't come right away, the children would literally start screaming, while the parents laughed. Another family had a 12-year-old daughter that would take all the sugar packets from the table and play with them. Much of the sugar ended up on the floor or on the table. Once I figured out what she was doing, I would go take away the basket before they sat down. Oh, only saw this family in there once, but it was a tatted up gangster couple. The moment was not older than 23. They had 4 kids. let them run around the restaurant untamed and basically ignored them the entire time. They made a mess of the tables and didn't even tip. Oh wait, they also tried stealing quarters off this cancer research donation thing we had. I work customer service at Loblaws part-time while I go to school. Lucky me, I've grown resentful of people, and one day I encountered a lady who was absolutely flabbergasted that her milk, on which the expiry date was clearly written, went bad. She was bitching and bitching. Had the store manager called down, the front end manager, the dairy manager too. Once this whole ordeal was handled, she turns to her 14-year-old daughter, Aprix 14, and says now, that's how it's done. On the way home from school with my son last year, I overheard one dad asking his son, "Are you a fudge packer?" then laughing repeatedly. Eventually his kid asked what a fudge packer was. He proceeded to tell him, "The scabby frick. What the frick is wrong with people? Fudge packer equals gay." That's how years of self-hatred for gay kids start. I was in Las Vegas and I saw a 10-year-old girl in a pleather miniskirt with her thongs sticking out complete with a tiny tube top. Her mother was dressed similarly. I thought they were prostitutes. Maybe they were going to a costume party? I can only hope. I've also seen a 5-year-old girl in a string, thong, bikini and no top at an amusement park. Kind off topic, but I never understood why people take their kids to Vegas. My friends and I walk to clubs in our low-cut, short skirt dresses and get dirty looks from parents. At 10 p.m. in Vegas. Come on. I work in social services, so highlights include the 10-year-old on probation after getting intoxicated on half a bottle of tequila, the 14-year-old whose mother told him he was the devil and she hated him because he told her he was an atheist, the dad with a 14-year-old daughter and 20-year-old live-in girlfriend, the latter who would regularly borrow the daughter's clothes, at a Goodwill with boyfriend, a girl maybe 3-4, with an obvious mental retardation, is left alone in a shopping cart while chatty mom is chatty. The girl stands up in the rocking cart, parked over concrete. Mom is still gossiping away nearby. The girl begins to teeter precariously, and boyfriend runs over and dives, catching her like a football literally a foot away from crashing her skull into the concrete. Mom turns around and proceeds to glare at boyfriend before snatching her child back and continuing her conversation. One of the worst. The 12-year-old, 400-pounds girl who, in addition to the horrific nutrition, had never been taught hygiene. Like, at all. I cannot exaggerate how much this poor child reeked, and you could honestly not be within 5 feet of her without the overpowering urge to vomit. Worse, while working with us, there was an incident where she bled on one of our seats. We asked her about having her period, and she said that she didn't have it. We asked how often this happened, and she said about once every 3 or 4 weeks. She had been having her period for a year and had no idea. Also, she defecated in my car. I used to work at Marshall's and we had a small toy section. There was a little boy, about 2, sitting on the floor minding his own business playing. His mom, who was on the phone, found this unsatisfactory and took off her shoe and beat him with it. She checked out, still talking on the phone, with that boy crying in tow. Our managers said we couldn't do anything about it because some kind of code of conduct. Still makes me sad to think about it. F the code of conduct. Call CPS. Waiting for an oil change. There was a white mother and her mixed black-white daughter, maybe 4 or 5 years old, with me in the waiting area. The waiting area had some sad-looking children's books and toys. The kid was trying to do a puzzle and asked the mother for help. Mother said no. The kid kept trying to finish the puzzle to no avail, and finally asked Mama, "Why can't I do this puzzle?" Mother responds, "'Cause you a dumb button." Headed up to the San Juan Islands, Washington State. I'm on the car deck about to walk off before the cars. Little girl about 4 or 5 is walking back and forth excited to get off the ferry. The workers are about to raise the gate and let the passengers off. So dad to my left say, "Come hold daddy's hand, Mary." At which point the girl turns to her dad and fricking spits at him. His response, actual quote, in a sing-song voice, "No sweetie, don't spit at daddy. If I pulled that crap growing up I would have been nursing a sore butt for days. I suck at pre-coffee spell checking." Yeah, but now you have to worry about strangers calling CPS on you for spanking. I once passed a pickup on the interstate with a 4-wheeler in the back. There was a kid of maybe 8 or 9 sitting on the 4-wheeler, while the truck was doing at least 60-70 miles per hour. I was biking down the bike path near the lake. On my right there was a family picnic and everything seemed normal until I saw the mom stand up, take a leather belt, where she got it from, I have no idea, she was wearing a dress, and smack it across her 3-year-old's, I'm guessing at the age, face. It actually looked almost comical the way the kid flew backwards and landed on the ground where his mom proceeded to beat him. I had never seen anything like it. It all happened so fast while I was on my bike. I was 100 feet away by the time I realized what I'd seen. I would have gone back except I was 10 and by myself with no self-confidence, especially against someone like that. I work at a child psychology clinic. It's like as soon as some parents walk through the door, their kids become the receptionist's responsibility. Once a kid pulled thumbtacks out of the wall and was chasing her brother around trying to stab him. His parents were sitting right there, and they did nothing. I had to intervene, cause she was trying to stab her brother with a thumbtack. I told her they were boy thumbtacks. If she held them for too long she'd turn into a boy. She dropped them immediately. We're actually here because we think she's transgender. The thing that really sucks is that my kid, who doesn't get away with being an butthole, sees other kids being buttholes and this only encourages him to act more like an butthole. That, along with the illiterate shoots at his school who teach him to say things like someone thieved my folder out my bag, is enough to make me want to pull my hair out, if I had any. I work at a sailing club and at the end of the day as we are waiting for the last few parents to pick up their children, one parent walks up to the club with a student who had already been picked up. They said they saw the kid sitting on the grass in the parking lot. Thinking this was weird, I asked the kid where his mom was. He didn't know, so we called his mom to find out what happened. Now the sailing club is a big place, so I figured they just got separated. But when I asked where she was, she said she left him there because, and I quote, he was being a little crap. So I left him. Following the second or two it took me to process this. I told her she needed to come pick him up, which she did, but it took more convincing than it should have. BTW, this kid was maybe 8 years old.
Sir Gawain, you are at the doorway of your destiny.
O greatest of kings, let your knights try to land a blow against me. Indulge me in this game.
I will meet thee. You will find.
Former cashier at Panera. No exaggeration here. This group walks through the door, and I hear my co-worker say under his breath, "Yeah, that's what happens when you keep it in the family." It was seriously gross. The father was wearing a sweat-stained t-shirt, sporting a spotty, unkempt beard hairstyle. We're talking Tom Hanks towards the end of Castaway here, and some seriously thick spectacles. He's holding his very queerly dressed and unfortunate looking daughter's hand. I've got to believe she was at least 16. In the creepiest way, everyone's wearing really weird ill-fitting dirty clothes. The other kids have some serious facial deformities. Kind of fetal alcohol syndrome and the mom is crotchety and gross, ignoring the father's hand on his teenage daughter's butt. I can't imagine them being too poor since they were buying food from Panera Bread. They all ordered tuna sandwiches and lemonade. Came up for refill after refill, and I had to smell them. My co-workers who had been there for longer than me said they came in all the time and were always mega weird and gross. I did see the family a few other times, same story. So, if you count incest as bad parenting, then yeah, bad parents. Worked at a department store at the mall for 3 years to pay for college. Our store was one of the huge anchor stores in our city's largest mall, and right next to the food court play area. At about 5 p.m., some employees see a group of 4 children walking around in our store. The eldest was a maybe 7-year-old girl, and the youngest was just barely 2 years old. No parents in sight. One of the friendly grandma employees approaches them and calls the security guard after learning their story. The 4 kids belonged to 2 different women, who came to the mall to have a girls' day shopping trip and left the kids in the play area while they shopped. It had been a while, and the 7-year-old got nervous and decided to go searching for their moms. The kids are taken upstairs to the manager's offices and given some snacks, crayons, and things to color. The 7-year-old is getting nervous and keeps asking to go back to the play area. After getting a description to mall security, they go on the hunt for moms. Police are called, etc. A mall security goon is posted at the play area with a description of the moms, waiting for them to come back. 3 hours later, the mall security dude brings the moms into the store to pick up their kids. A cop meets them there. The women are furious that we stole her kids, and I was checking in on them every 20 minutes. The cop informs them that this is impossible, as the kids have been inside our store for the last 3 hours. Much eye rolling and irritation coming from the moms, while the cops explaining to the moms how much trouble they are in. One of the moms looks at the 7-year-old with narrowed eyes and a slow head shake, telepathically beaming, "You are getting so whooped when we get home." The cop observes this and goes into full berserker mode. This lady cop, built like a gymnast, and actually quite pretty, gets up in this woman's face and screams at her, chewing her up and down. "If you lay a hand on any of these kids, I will personally come throw your ghetto bus in jail. Your children could have been abducted, debauched, murdered over 3 hours ago, and you just now be finding out they are missing. I am writing you a citation, and Child Protection Services and state social workers will be making surprise visits to your home frequently. If anything is out of order with these children, you will lose custody and probably go to prison. Do you understand me?" The wide-eyed ghetto moms, having been sufficiently humbled, get their paper arrest and shuffle out with their armfuls of shopping bags and kids to their respective vehicles. TLDR. 2 ghetto moms abandon children in mall play place. SAS cop, get slapped with long arm of law. I love it when a story goes horribly right. Not really strangers, because I'm married to one of them now. But when I first started dating my wife and I went to visit her and her son at her father's house, they were just piling on the kid like you would not believe. Everything he did wrong resulted in a nuclear explosion that they saw as being corrective, but what I saw as being borderline abuse. So I sat my now wife and her father down and explained it like this. There's this movie called Office Space. My now wife got the reference immediately. One of the vast number of reasons we're married now. And I told them the story about how the guy had 7 bosses and every time he screws up, he has to hear about it 7 times. They were both yelling at the kid every time he screwed up, which for a 13-year-old is pretty frequently, sometimes 20 or 30 times in my presence alone. I told them they're going to drive him crazy and he's going to go Columbine on their asses if they aren't careful. So they asked me what I would do. I told them to go to an office supply store and buy a whiteboard they can stick up by the front door, load it up with his chores and make him check them off when he's done. Then, instead of yelling at him 50 or 60 times a day, you just ask him if he's checked off his board. It worked. He's going to be 15 in a few weeks and doesn't even really need the board anymore. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day, and
Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. Once I had the skin debrided, you could see the bones.